Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, students. I hope you are doing well. Welcome to the 6th lecture of your course Training and Development. As you would remember that we were discussing strategic training, and within that we were discussing the strategic training and development process. You would remember that I told you that the process of training and development, it starts with the business strategy. It should come out of the business strategy. It should be linked with the organizational goals. And the final step of this process is that you have to evaluate the training effectiveness. So today we are going to discuss the importance of evaluation of training effectiveness. And the second thing that we are going to discuss are the organizational characteristics that influence the setup of training in an organization. So let's start with discussing what is the importance of evaluation, what is the importance of metrics that are used to evaluate the effectiveness of training in an organization. ये तो आप जानते ही हैं कि किसी भी काम को जो कि किसी पर्पस के लिए किया जाए, उसके आउटकम को मेजर करना उस प्रोसेस का एक सबसे इम्पोर्टेंट पार्ट होता है. सो आपने कोई भी काम करना है तो उसका फायदा क्या हुआ, उसका आउटकम क्या निकला, ये देखना एक बहुत जरूरी अमल है उस सारे प्रोसेस के अंदर. इसी तरह ट्रेनिंग एंड डेवलपमेंट के प्रोसेस में भी ट्रेनिंग की इवैल्यूएशन एक बहुत जरूरी और एक बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट अमल है ट्रेनिंग और डेवलपमेंट के प्रोसेस को डिजाइन करने का और इम्प्लीमेंट करने के लिए. मैट्रिक्स आर दोज मेजर्स दैट आर यूज्ड टू evaluate the training effectiveness. The effectiveness of training is not always only related to financial outcomes or cost and benefit analysis. It is not only related to how much was spent and how much does it contribute to earning of an organization. Because training is related to the development of the employees, and training is related to changing the attitudes and behaviors of the employees, and it is also related to developing them to be able to grow. So the metrics that are involved to evaluate the process of training are not just financial metrics, but also other metrics that are meaningful to the process of training or to the objectives of training. So there can be several objectives of training. For example, if you have organized a training session that helps employees learn about quality control, so the objective of this training session is to help them improve the quality of the of the products and reduce errors. कि क्वालिटी जो है प्रोडक्ट की वो इम्प्रूव की जाए और उसके प्रोसेस में इतनी इम्प्रूवमेंट लेके आई जाए कि एरर्स जो हैं वो इस प्रोसेस में कम से कम होते जाएं. सो फॉर एग्जाम्पल, इवन इफ यू जस्ट ऑर्डर अ मील फ्रॉम अ रेस्टोरेंट एंड इफ दैट मील इज नॉट अकॉर्डिंग टू द स्पेसिफिकेशंस, वो आपके पास जब घर पहुंचता है तो वो ऑर्डर नहीं है जो कि आपने ऑर्डर किया था, तो ये एक एरर है. सो ये डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन एरर जो है इसको रिड्यूस करने के लिए एम्प्लॉयज को ट्रेनिंग देने की जरूरत है कि जब वो ऑर्डर लें और ऑर्डर जो है वो जब एग्जीक्यूट हो तो वो वही ऑर्डर एग्जीक्यूट हो जो कि ऑर्डर दिया गया था. इसी तरह बहुत सारे क्वालिटी कंट्रोल के एस्पेक्ट्स होते हैं जिनको रिड्यूस करने के लिए क्वालिटी कंट्रोल की ट्रेनिंग दी जाती है. सो जब क्वालिटी कंट्रोल की ट्रेनिंग दी जाएगी तो उसकी इफेक्टिवनेस को मेजर करने के लिए आप क्या मेजर करेंगे, क्या देखेंगे, व्हाट वुड बी द मैट्रिक्स दैट वुड शो दैट दिस ट्रेनिंग वाज इफेक्टिव. सो इफ योर एरर्स इन द प्रोडक्शन प्रोसेस और डिलीवरी प्रोसेस they reduce, that means that your training was effective. There are 3 levels on which training is analyzed or should be analyzed after any training effort that has been taken place in an organization. The first level is whether the employees have been satisfied from the training process. क्या employees जिनको training दी गई है वो training के process से satisfied हैं? Was it easy to understand? Was the material understandable? Do they think that it is related to their performance improvement? Do they consider it as an important process that they should have undergone through? So what is the satisfaction of the employees out of the training process? That is the first thing that should be measured. The second level of analysis is that has there been any change in the abilities, skills, attitudes or behaviors of the employees that was required out of the training. So कोई change आया है जो change required था. So if a skill was required to be developed in the employees, has that skill been developed in them? Or if a behavior change was required in the employees, has the behavior actually changed? So that is the second level, कि जो change required था, वो change आया है कि नहीं. And the third level of analysis is that whether the change that has taken place, does it lead to any business related outcomes or not? So the change that takes place must be related to business related outcomes. Well, here I'm not saying that it leads to financial outcomes, but business related outcomes. These business related outcomes, they are obviously related to the objectives of the training. There should be a close link between the objectives of the training and the business related outcomes that were required out of the training. For example, if the training was conducted to make employees feel more engaged with their work, has it resulted in higher employee engagement or employee commitment? Or if the training was organized to reduce the turnover of the employees, has the turnover actually reduced? So has there been any business related outcomes that have taken place out of the process of training? So the business related outcomes that can be measured as an outcome of training, the examples are that has there been any improvement in employee engagement or commitment? Has there been any improvement in employee turnover? Has there been any improvement in or reduction in the number of defects in product delivery or product design? Has there been any increase in the number of new products that have been developed in the organization? Has there been any reduction in the time of new product development? Or another business-related outcome of a training process is that has there been any reduction in time in filling managerial position in the organization? अब ये आप पूछेंगे कि managerial positions जल्दी fill हो जाने का training से क्या ताल्लुक है? So managerial positions आपकी जितनी आसानी से और जितनी जल्दी from the organization अगर आपकी fill up हो जाती हैं, तो it means that you are investing the right resources in the developmental process. That's why managers and employees, they are available to take over the positions, the managerial positions that become vacant in your organization, and you don't have to go on searching and searching within your organization and or outside your organization. So that means that the developmental process, the career development process or the succession planning process in your organization, that is effective and your managerial positions are filled in a shortened period of time. So that is also a business related outcome, that your managerial positions, they don't stay vacant for a very long time. So all these kind of metrics may be analyzed in order to see the effectiveness of training. The effectiveness of training is very important for the organization and as well as for the trainers and the training consultants as well. Because that is something that brings meaning to the work that they are doing. So if you in the future are going to become a trainer or a training consultant, this is something, the metrics or the outcomes that are business related, these are the things that will make your work meaningful. कि आप लोगों को बता सकें, आप managers को convince कर सकें कि अगर आप ये training करवाएंगे तो इसका ये फायदा आपकी organization को होगा. So this is very important for the trainers and training consultants to know that what business related outcomes are possible out of a particular training program. So this is what gives meaning to your work if you are going to become a training consultant or a trainer in the future. Okay, so organizations, they have realized out of their process of evolution that financial performance is not the only outcome or the only measurable performance of the organization. So what they are using in current situation, in current organizational context, is not just the financial performance or the dividends earned by the shareholders, but a balanced scorecard that analyzes an organizational performance from a number of perspectives. So a balanced scorecard may also be used to analyze the effectiveness of a training program. So a balanced scorecard is a means of performance measurement that provides managers with a chance to look at the overall company performance or the performance of departments or functions from the perspective of internal and external customers, employees, and shareholders. From this definition, you can easily see that the organizational performance is measured from a number of perspectives. So it's not only measured from the perspective of the shareholder, but all the stakeholders, all the internal customers, the external customers, as well as the employees, and finally the shareholders. So there are 4 perspectives of analyzing an organizational performance from 4 aspects. So these perspectives are from the perspective of the customer, from the perspective of the internal processes, from the perspective of innovation and learning, and finally the financial perspective. So financial perspective is only just one part of all the perspectives that are used to develop this balanced scorecard. So from the perspective of customer means how much your customers are satisfied, how much they are brand loyal. From the perspective of internal processes means how much quality is there in your processes of your organization, how much errors they take place, how much defects they take place, and how smooth and fluent your processes are of your organization. And from the perspective of learning and innovation, that means that how much you are improving your products, how much new products you are bringing into the marketplace, and how effectively your employees are learning and growing in your organization. And finally is the financial perspective, that how much actually in figures or in numbers your organization is earning from how much it is spending. So when you look at the training function from all these perspectives, the customers of training, they are the employees that get the training, and the customers are also, that can also be a perspective that how much customers are satisfied after the training is given to your customer service employees, or how much customer satisfaction overall has improved as a result of the training. From the perspective of internal processes, how much has there been improvement in the internal processes of your organization. For example, Ingersoll Rand is an American organization. It is a corporation that sells diversified products, industrial products, to various different customers. they have offered a performance improvement training program, a training workshop that was related to Lean Six Sigma. Six Sigma is, you must be knowing that is a quality control process through which quality of the product is improved so that defects are reduced. So Lean Six Sigma is also a type of Six Sigma quality control. So they gave this training to their employees in Lean Six Sigma of quality control. And the outcome that they measured of this quality control training workshop was that there were hundreds of thousands of dollars saved by reducing vendor delivery costs by 76%. So this is a metric that they have used to evaluate that the vendor delivery costs, they reduced by 76%, and that led to a saving of hundreds of thousands of dollars. So this is how the effectiveness of training, of a particular training program, may be measured and should be measured, that links to the objectives of the training, which must be linked to the business strategy of an organization. Now we are going to discuss the various organizational characteristics that influence the setup of training in an organization. By setup of training, I mean to say that the various aspects of training, like how much training is organized, where it is organized, what type of employees are trained, how much is invested in the training function of an organization. All these things, they are influenced by the organizational characteristics. आपकी organization किस तरह से organized है, आपकी organization का structure क्या है, वहाँ पे top management का vision क्या है, उनकी global presence क्या है, उनके business units कितने integrated हैं, और उनकी बाकी human resource strategies वो क्या हैं, ये सब चीजें आपके training और development function को influence करती हैं. So हम one by one इन characteristics को examine करेंगे, explore करेंगे और देखेंगे कि training के function के ऊपर इनका क्या effect होता है. So पहली चीज जो कि आपके training और development के function को affect करती है, वो ये है कि आपके employees और managers क्या रोल परफॉर्म करते हैं आपकी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन में. What are the roles of your employees and managers in your organization? As you know that we had discussed that traditionally or a few decades ago, the managers were required to command and control the employees and the organization. But now, with the changing environment, with the changing business context, with more innovation and learning required at every level of the organization, the managers have to become facilitators of the people of the organization. So rather than commanding and controlling the people of their organization, they have to facilitate them to come up with new ideas, to come up with innovation, and to take initiatives themselves. So a traditional organization in which the organization is structured in a traditional way, the role of the managers in such an organization, there are several roles of a manager in a traditional organization. उसमें traditional organization में manager के क्या role होता है? एक तो ये कि individual performance को manage करना, देखना कि लोग कितना perform कर रहे हैं, क्या वो requirement के मुताबिक है, और फिर अगर नहीं है तो उनको motivate करना कि वो अपनी performance improve करें और एक certain level तक लेकर आएं, या अगर उनको उनकी स्किल्स डेफिशिएंट हैं तो उनको ट्रेनिंग प्रोवाइड की जाए कि वो अपनी परफॉर्मेंस को इम्प्रूव करके एक सर्टन लेवल के ऊपर लेकर आए. वो परफॉर्मेंस जो कि मैनेजर स्पेसिफाई करेगा कि एक एम्प्लॉय को इतना परफॉर्म करना चाहिए. सो अ मैनेजर इन अ ट्रेडिशनल ऑर्गेनाइजेशन हैज टू मैनेज परफॉर्मेंस. The second thing is that the manager has to develop the employees. So it is the manager who has to take the initiative what development an employee would need. उसको क्या ट्रेनिंग की जरूरत है, उसको क्या डेवलपमेंट की जरूरत है. So manager is going to be the person who decides that this person, this employee requires this much of training or this kind of direction. Another role in a traditional organization a manager has to perform is to plan and allocate resources. That person has resources and that has to allocate them, that these resources, these financial resources will go at this place, these human resources will go in this place. इतने लोग इस टीम में काम करेंगे, इतने लोग इस टीम में काम करेंगे, इतना बजट इस टीम को मिलेगा, इतना बजट इस टीम को मिलेगा. तो मैनेजर ने allocate करने हैं और प्लान करने हैं resources को. Then manager in a traditional organization has to coordinate interdependent groups. So if your team or if your group, if for example you are a manager of the financial section of the organization, if the marketing department that needs some resources, तो marketing department का head जो है वो आपके पास आएगा कि जी हमें ये पैसे चाहिए marketing के budget के लिए, ये बजट हमें एलोकेट कर दें. तो जो मैनेजर है उसने इंटरडिपेंडेंट ग्रुप्स को कोऑर्डिनेट करना है सो दैट रिसोर्सेज दैट आर रिक्वायर्ड फॉर योर बिजनेस यूनिट और योर बिजनेस ग्रुप आर मेड अवेलेबल टू योर बिजनेस यूनिट. देन अ मैनेजर हैज टू मैनेज ग्रुप परफॉर्मेंस, दैट द ग्रुप दैट इज अंडर दैट पर्सन that is performing according to the requirements. Then a manager has to monitor the business environment. So that person has to see how many clients, how many customers there are, and how to improve these customers, how to improve this customer pool, how to improve client relationships, and so on and so forth. So that person has to manage the business environment and then scan the business environment for product opportunities, for new product development, for latent needs in the marketplace. So that the manager has to manage the business environment. And finally, a manager in a traditional role has to represent his or her unit. So he has to be the spokesperson for his unit. The spokesperson for his unit within the organization, or if it is required, outside the organization as well. So these are the roles that a manager needs to perform in a traditional organization. These are the traditional roles of a manager in an organization. You can see from this collection of roles that all of these roles are very structured. Monitoring, managing, developing, these are structured and these require the skills of commanding and controlling. Whereas today's organizations, a lot of them are now being organized as high performance work systems. What are high performance work systems? Organizations that are organized in teams. There are no hierarchies or no structures. There are only teams that are organized around a particular competency. For example, Apple is an organization that Steve Jobs says that is organized as a stardom. He says that it's the biggest stardom on this planet. There's one person who's in charge of the iOS software operating system. There's one person in charge of the Mac hardware. There's one person in charge of the global marketing function. There's one person in charge of the production and operations. And he says that all of these team leaders, they meet together for 3 hours every week and discuss about all aspects of the organization. And what Steve Jobs does is that he facilitates the discussion. He gives ideas to them, and he listens to their ideas. I would like you to search on the internet about this interview. It is available on the internet. If you search by Steve Jobs talks about managing people, you will find this video. It is very interesting. And you will get an impression, an idea of how a high-performance work system is organized. So in a high-performance work system, there are teams. There are no big structures. There are no hierarchies. So there are team leaders and there are team members. And that's it. That's the only hierarchy. And the teams, they are responsible for recruiting new people, for getting resources, for bringing in new ideas, and for all the functions that are involved around that particular competency for which the team is organized. So in a high-performance work system, the role of the manager is not to command and control. The role of the team leader is not to command and control, is not to direct. The role of a team leader or the role of a manager in a high-performance work system shifts from being a commander to being a facilitator. So if we look at the various roles that a manager performs in a high-performance work system, these roles are, number one, managing alignment. There should be an alignment between the business goals and the team goals. Manager has to help the employees manage their objectives. Does not direct their objectives, but manage their objectives. And the manager has to scan the organizational environment for useful information that he or she can give to his or her team so that they can use that information for generating good ideas. So managing and alignment needs to align between organizational goals and team goals. Another role that manager has to perform in a high-performance work system is to coordinate activities. Not direct activities, but coordinate activities. And make sure that the performance of the team is according to the requirements or according to the goals that were set. Then, this person has to facilitate the decision-making process. The team comes up with the idea, and they have to decide whether that idea is feasible, viable, and the manager has to facilitate the decision-making process. That person has to guide the team in making the right and rational decision. So the manager will not take the decision himself, but facilitate the team to take the decision. Then a manager in a high-performance work system has to facilitate continuous learning. By facilitating continuous learning, this person has to help employees identify the training needs. So he does not have to tell them or direct them what training needs are required in the team members. He or she helps them identify कि उनको किस training की ज़रूरत है. And then this person develops an environment that facilitates continuous learning and continuous growth and innovation. So this person has to create that environment, provide that environment to employees or members of his work team. And finally, this person has to create and maintain trust. Trust is the most important factor in these work teams. If you will listen to that interview, this is what Steve Jobs also points out. That we have to trust that people will do their work without requiring to monitor them all the time. So trust is the most important factor, and it is the team leader who has to develop that trust and to maintain that trust within the group members. So from all these type of roles, you can easily see that all these roles are roles that require people skills. So managing, coordinating, encouraging, and helping build trust, all these roles, they require people's skills that are required to communicate and connect with people. So that means that the training function of a high-performance work system has to include building people's skills, has to include making good leaders, has to include improving the communication skills of the people, and helping them learn how to develop an environment in which learning takes place. So the implication of the roles of the managers that are being performed in an organization, whether your organization is organized in a traditional way or it is organized in a more contemporary organizational structure, that will affect what kind of training your employees and managers will require in order to perform their roles effectively. The second thing that affects your training function is top management support. For anything to happen within an organization, there has to be the top management support. If the CEO and the top management, the directors of an organization, they are not committed to a particular initiative, a particular way of organizing things in the organization, then that initiative will not take place. It will not be effective. It will not lead to the outcomes. So the CEO of the organization, how much committed he or she is to the training function of the organization, that will influence how training is organized in your company. So the CEO or the top management, they have to perform various roles so that the training function can be effective in the organization. What are these various roles? The top management has to provide a clear vision. What type of learning do they want the employees to have in the organization? Whether they want to develop their employees, whether they want them to stick around for a long time. What is the vision of the organization? So the CEO has to communicate a clear vision of the learning function of the organization. The second role that a CEO has to perform in relation to the training function of an organization is to be the sponsor of the training function. That person needs to sponsor through financial resources, first of all. That person has to sanction financial resources for the training and development. And then this person has to sponsor through encouragement as well as commitment. Then this person has to act as a governor that monitors and helps set the objectives of the training function. What would be the objectives of the training function? And help revise these objectives, help to develop these objectives, and help to modify these objectives. So this person has to govern the training and development function of the organization. If that person, if the CEO is not involved in taking decisions or in helping to make decisions about this aspect of the organization, it will lose its direction. Another function or role that a CEO has to perform is to be the subject matter expert. That person has to provide guidance in the subject matter, in deciding the subject matter of the training or development that is provided to the employees. So that person needs to be an expert or that person needs to be familiar with all the aspects of the organization for which training is being provided to the employees. So that person has to act as a subject matter expert. Then this person also has to play the role of the faculty. So a CEO is required, or CEO should involve himself in providing input to the training function. Faculty means that this person goes and discusses various aspects of the training program. So वो जाके वहाँ पे lecture दे, या कुछ learning material provide करे, या कुछ online resources provide करे. The CEO has to perform this role as well. Then the CEO also has to perform the role of the learner. That person has to role model that learning is something which is the way things are done in this organization, and show the enthusiasm for learning by learning himself. So this person must show that he or she is keen to learn, is enthusiastic to learn, and role model this behavior in front of other employees. So if the employees will see that the CEO of the organization is so keen and ambitious about learning, they will also try to imitate that behavior, will also try to develop that behavior in themselves. And finally, this person has to act as the marketing agent of the learning function of the organization. So this person has to advocate the learning function by talking about it in speeches, or in the annual reports, or other public relations events. So this person has to market or promote the learning function of the organization. That learning is something that is fostered in this place, fostered in this organization, and talk about the advantages and talk about the outcomes of the learning function of the organization. So वो बताए कि ट्रेनिंग और लर्निंग का क्या फ़ायदा है, उसका क्या एम्फेसिस है, उसकी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन में क्या इम्पोर्टेंस है, एम्प्लॉयज़ ने उससे क्या बेनिफिट लिया है, ऑर्गेनाइजेशन ने उससे क्या बेनिफिट लिया है. ये सब बातें जब आपका सीईओ प्रमोट करे, जब आपका सीईओ उसके बारे में बात करे, तो इससे ये इम्प्रेशन मिलेगा ओवरऑल ऑर्गेनाइजेशन में कि लर्निंग एक ऐसा अमल है जो कि इस ऑर्गेनाइजेशन में इनकरेज किया जाता है. आपकी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन का सीईओ इसके साथ इतना कमिटेड है. सो दिस विल हेल्प मैनेजर्स एंड एम्प्लॉयज टेक इनिशिएटिव फॉर organizing learning and organizing a learning environment in the organization. So the more there is top management support for the learning function in the organization, the better learning environment is going to be created. The more the top management or the CEO is able to perform all these roles for the learning function of the organization, the better is going to be the effectiveness of the training and development function in your organization. Another aspect or another organizational characteristic that influences the training function is the level of integration of your business units. If your business units are integrated into each other, if information flows very easily, and if work roles are organized in an integrated manner, then your training function also has to be very integrated. So people should be given cross-training so that they are able to perform roles in various functions of the organization, because it is an integrated organization. Whereas if your organization is segregated, highly segregated and structured according to the functions of your organization, or according to the product line of the organization, or according to the divisions of the organization. And if it is very much separated, then the training function will also have to be separated for all these separate units of the organization. So the level of integration of your business units is going to influence how much your training function can be integrated. For example, if your finance department is organized in a very structured and in a very hierarchical manner, and your marketing department is organized in a team, then your training function cannot be integrated for both these departments, because they are highly separated and they operate in very different ways. Another aspect that influences your training function is the level of global presence of your organization. So for example, if you are operating on a global level, that means that your organization will have employees from many different regions. So if your organization is operating in North America, in Europe, in Asia, in Central Asia, in Far East, in Australia, all these different continents, then the people of the countries in which your organization is operating will have different values, will have different traditions, will have different work ethics. For example, the Japanese work ethic is very different from the Western work ethic. And that is again very different from the Asian work ethic. So how you will motivate and how you will monitor the performance of people and how you will motivate them to work for the business vision of your organization, which has to be the same business vision all over, that is going to affect your training and development function. So it is possible that your training can either be organized in a centralized manner, but with customizations for the local area. So the content may be the same, but your training is provided in various different languages. That is possible if the training is related to some skills. For example, if you want people to learn how to use computer, you only need to change the language. Or if you want to make people learn how to drive or how to operate a machinery, that will only require you to translate the use of that machinery in the language that is the local language of a particular place. But if you have to train your managers for leadership development, that is a very cultural variable. That is a very cultural concept. So leadership is conducted in different ways in different cultures. People are accepted for being good leaders differently in different cultures. So your leadership training or your leadership development, that has to be an amalgamation of the values of your own company and the values of the culture in which your subsidiary is operating. So you cannot have a you cannot have a uniform or a standardized program for leadership development all over your foreign subsidiaries. Then you also have to take care of cultural training of your employees who go and work in other countries. So if employees from the parent company, from the parent country, go to work in a country where a subsidiary of that country is of that company is operating, in another country where language is different, where culture is different, the employee who goes from the parent country to the subsidiary country has to be given an orientation, a cultural orientation about the culture and traditions of the country in which he or she is going. And then also support needs to be provided for that person's family to settle down over there. So you need to see that if that person has got children, what kind of schools they would be going to, how they will get acquainted with the culture, what kind of problems they may be facing, and you have to prepare them. You have got to prepare their mind for that. You have got to tell them about various safety requirements that may be part of that culture or environment. So all these things need to be told, they need to be communicated to the people who are going to work in the other countries. And then you also have to take care of the aspect that when these people, they come back, the repatriation process, that has to be streamlined as well. They need to be adjusted back into the culture of the parent country. So all these things, they influence what kind of training and how training will be organized in your organization if you have a global presence. What kind of global presence you have, in which countries are you operating, at what scale are you operating, and finally, if you don't have a global presence, then that is going to affect your training function in that it can be more standardized and more uniformly delivered. So these were the various organizational characteristics that influence the training function. The most important of them is the human resource practice mix of the organization, which we are going to discuss in the next session. How your human resource practice mix affects the training function of your organization. So in this lecture, we have discussed the rest of the organizational characteristics that influence your training function, which is the roles that employees are supposed to play in your organization, the top management support, the integration of your business units, and the global presence of your organization. So we will conclude our session today. Until next time, we meet again. Allah Hafiz.